love a dungaree.
Eavesdroppin.
There you are, Michelle.
I'm here. You've seen me.
She's arrived. I have arrived, says Michelle Margarita, one half of popular podcast Eavesdroppin.
The comedy podcast. And if you didn't realise, you're listening to me, Michelle.
That's her.
And you, Geordie.
And sorry, was that my intro moment? Sorry. And me, Geordie. Geordie, it's me.
It is.
I'm the other one. I'm the tall one with the blonde hair. She's the little tiny one with metal teeth.
Yes, thank you very much. And you guys, dear people, you're eavesdroppers because you're eavesdropping on
Thank
us.
God, you poor bastards. Welcome.
Sometimes I do think that.
Oh, I bumped into my postie today. He's not dead. He had his
Oh, thank
earphones
God.
in. He was listening to you saying something bad about him. I can't remember what you said, but something along the lines of he could be a murderer. Poor Dan. I said I'd give him a shout out, and he shouted, "Shout out!" There's your shout out, Dan.
There is your shout out. And I'm glad you're not dead, Dan. Glad you're not dead.
So am I. Otherwise, who would bring me my ASOS parcels? To be fair, though, it wasn't him. He did knock on the door and say those buggers had left that ASOS parcel just on the door. It's somebody else, another company. They just left it at the door. They didn't even knock. I was in.
Rude.
I know.
And then he said, keep smiling.
It didn't. That's not him. That's
It's the other postie. Too many posties in your life.
yeah, too many posters. I do love it when people tell you to keep smiling or cheer up, love. It could be worse.
Oh,
All
hang
that
on.
bullshit. Fuck off.
Or your favourite one.
What?
Live, laugh, love.
Oh, live, love, love. Oh, who says that? Live, love, love. I hate that.
Or partner in crime is also
Partner in crime.
a pet hate.
For you.
Partner in crime.
I hate it when I flick through the Instagrams and I see things like, well, you know this because we did a whole reel on it, and relax.
And relax.
Or when it's the end of something. So that was 1985 or whatever.
For me, it's when you see all of these Instagram, well, I guess they're influencers or wannabe influencers, and they just have all of those terrible self-help, affirmation, positive thinking slogans.
Because I made it, you can too.
Oh my God, that's exactly it. And I just feel like, fuck off. And there it is, the first
Yes,
swear.
do fuck off. Absolutely.
The first swear of the podcast. I have to say, I was talking to Jen.
Oh, hi, Jen. How's she doing? Does she know she had us all on the edge of our seats on tenterhooks, hoping that she'd be okay? Is she aware that everybody is rooting for Jen?
I know, she'd scared the bejesus out of all of us. Well,
she?
it doesn't end, does it? She's just gone and had bloody skin cancer.
Oh,
surgery
no.
for that. But she's got another one. They've said that one can be fixed with cream. And I said, what's the cream called, Mum? And she went, it's called F.U. Dicks. And
Oh, no, it's not. Jen, I'm sure it's not
said,
called
Mum,
that.
are you sure it's called F.U. Dicks?
I think you'll find, Jen, it's pronounced differently.
It might be F.U. Dicks or something. I don't know. But Jen's got a cream. It's called F.U. Dicks. And she's going to pop that F.U. Dicks on her face.
Pop it on your face, Jen. If you're a medical professional, please write in. We would love to know what cream she's really putting on her face. Hopefully it's not F.U. Dicks. Oh, my gosh. Oh, now, Michelle, what else was I going to tell you? Oh, Charlene. God, I love Happy Chappy Charlene. She's just pinged me a little Instagram message about next door. What did she say? It was just a one-liner, but you know how for our other podcast, which is now, thank God, come to a close for the season.
It was a lot.
The Married at First Night companion. And we...
Married at first sight.
What did I say?
Married at first night.
What's happening? Yeah, well, Michelle and I came to bloody blows on that. It's called Show Dumpin', and we will do other TV programs, but maybe not like 9 weeks of it in a row with a third member who doesn't show up.
I know he doesn't show up. I did listen back to that episode, the entire episode. I'm just like, well, I disagree.
I have to disagree.
I have to disagree.
I'm going to disagree.
I just thought, my God, you and I did not see eye to eye on that.
I did
was
not agree.
cracking up. because we normally have never disagreed on anything.
No.
And it was just...
Apart from the moon landings.
We shan't talk about that.
What did Chappie say to me? Let me see.
Oh, she is a dear.
She said, we're backing and forthing here. Now, look, there's more. She said, after listening to last week's episode where I talked about my neighborhood dog app, she said, the Nextdoor app is the ultimate comment section cesspit.
She comes up with all the good one-liners, doesn't she?
Great turn of phrase. Yes. I said, oh my God, I know what a bunch of bored ninnies. I said, she said, ugh, it's the worst. The local Facebook groups are gold mines of pointless arguments and questions. People could just Google themselves rather than write a post and wait for answers. Well, that's true, but I wonder how lonely these people on the Facebooks are.
They've got nothing else to do.
And on the Nextdoors.
They've got nothing else to do. It's a platform. They want to be listened. Listen to me.
Yes, well, listen to us, actually. Listen to Eavesdroppin the podcast. At least you can have a laugh.
Exactly. And if you...
Not always,
and
though.
if you want to hear us coming to blows and you're a Maths UK fan, go listen to Show Dumpin'.
What is that accent?
I don't actually know.
I've got some TV recommendations, Michelle.
I have one as well. Don't let me forget.
I won't. One of them is from Rains Park Mark. I feel like it's a misnomer, really, because he doesn't live in Rains Park anymore, but Yule Village doesn't rhyme with Mark.
No, it does not.
Yule Village Mark. It makes him sound like he lives in the town where it's Christmas every day, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And
Yule Village.
we're nearly at that time of the month, and I don't mean your rags. I mean Christmas.
Oh, God.
What?
The rags.
I'm just saying.
Why did you bring rags into it?
Because I said it's nearly that time of the month. Actually, when this comes out, it's not even going to be December. Oh my God, what a dick.
Never mind. Michelle just went off-piste there for a second. So anyway, he wanted to recommend Bad Vegan, which we watched, didn't we?
I did not watch that with you.
Didn't you want to do a story on that?
Oh, is it the one that had the restaurant in New York?
Yes.
Yes, I think I started watching that. Do you know what? There's so many I've started, and then for one reason or another, I forget to finish them.
ADHD, darling. That's what that is.
No, it's called having 6 jobs.
So I watched Alma's Not Normal. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, it's really good. It's really good. It's one of those things where it's a comedian and her name is, I can't remember.
Alma?
Sophie. No, can't remember. And she wrote herself a TV program to be in, basically. Semi-autobiographical, much like all the other ones that we've seen.
Shall we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to you after the podcast.
All right. Let's have a meeting. I'll get my people to talk to your people, Michelle. How about that?
Thank you. I'm doing a finger to my... Call me.
So Alma's Not Normal. There's 2 series. They're on BBC and Gold, UK Gold. I think I found the other one on. We've watched one already. Siobhan Finneran is an actress who was in Happy Valley. She was the sister. She plays the druggy mum in this, and she is gold. She's amazing to watch.
She was the druggy sister as well in Happy Valley. Yeah, they love casting her as a druggy, but I love her. She's great.
She's a wonderful actress. Anyway, she is in it and a load of other great people. It's a really good story. There's 2 best friends and Alma falls on hard times. And she comes from a really rough background, actually, really tricky background. So it's good. It's a good watch. It's comedy.
It sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one for the nerds.
Oh, yeah.
For the developer nerds, for the computer nerds.
What is it?
Oh.
You've forgotten.
I just had a mental blank. I have forgotten. I've forgotten because I don't think I even know what it's called. It's in Swedish.
Well, this is a riveting conversation, Michelle. I hope everybody out there is listening and having a great time.
It's about bloody Pirate Bay, because Pirate Bay was Swedish. And the 3, I would say, Spectrum-y guys who were complete computer geeks, and they changed the world. And it is actually very interesting. I mean, it's drama, so it's, it's not a documentary, but it's based on true facts.
True facts.
We watched episode 1 and I actually really loved it. I really enjoyed it.
Oh.
But Daily Motion has the English subtitles, but it's a bit hard because when they type in code, it's in Swedish.
But isn't it just all 1s and 0s anyway?
Well, no, they're typing little messages to each other. Hoo-ha.
Hoo-ha.
Pirate Bay.
Okay, great. So I also had another heads up on a TV show from Jannica in Amsterdam. Or Jannica from Amsterdam.
Or Jannickers.
Jannickers. She loves that.
I bet she does.
She doesn't. So it's kind of in the same vein as Druggy Mum, as I was speaking before about Alma and her druggy mum. It is actually a docuseries on Paramount or Sky, directed by Rory Kennedy, who is Bobby Kennedy's daughter. And it's the HBO series called The Synanon Fix. Have you ever heard of Synanon, Michelle?
No, I have not.
It's funny because the more I watched it, the more I thought, I have heard this mentioned before.
I thought you said Cinnabon, which is that donut company.
No, it's not Cinnabon.
Bon.
It's not even Cinnabon.
Okay.
It's 1958, and I did not do the charts, Michelle. I imagine it's something like Shake, Rattle, and Roll or something like that.
Yes, Elvis.
Bill Haley and the Comets.
Since my baby left me.
There's this guy called Charles or Chuck Dederich, who was a former alcoholic. He's sober thanks to the good work of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he started a group in his hometown of San Diego in California after taking some acid.
Oh, lovely.
He felt there wasn't enough help out there for the heroin addicts of the area. Okay. Because at that time, it was a bloody epidemic in the US, especially in California.
Heroin.
Hardcore. It was all the rage in 1958, yes. Everybody was falling prey to it. And after his own success in AA, he felt that people didn't open up enough in the AA. So he came up with his own program and named it I almost called it Cinnabon. Oh, it's Synanon.
Okay.
At this point, there were no residential drug programs, and the foundation was a huge success because Synanon had this approach called The Game, which is a form of group therapy where participants would sit around and confront each other to the point where they're screaming abuse and telling each other what they really think, you know?
This sounds like an evil version of We're Not Really Strangers.
Possibly, yes. There's a lot of screaming and shouting, and at the end you hug it out and you feel better. But whatever, it was amazing because it had great recovery rates. A lot of these lifer heroin addicts ended up completely, well, not cured, but, you know, no longer addicts. And Donald Cressy, who's a sociologist from the University of California, referred to Synanon in a 1961 Time article as the most important effort to help addicts stay away from drugs that has ever occurred.
Wow. What was it that made it so successful? What was the psychological...
The therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The game.
The game, exactly. There were some rules. You couldn't use any violence and, of course, no drugs allowed. But after that, anything goes. And it's quite troubling to watch the people scream and hurl abuse at each other. But, you know, if it's an effective way to get off the smack, then go nuts, you know?
Is it an effective way to be a human?
Listen in and find out.
Ooh.
The community lived off donations and managed to work entirely without any professional help. So there were no nurses coming in. There was no methadone programs, nothing.
Oh, God. So it's not even in conjunction with the methadone program?
No, purely the screaming at you therapy, The Game. Advocates say The Game helped people to work on themselves in a constructive way as opposed to the destructive way that drugs provided. And it was incredible to see the results from people who, like I said, felt like they were in this for life and there was no way out. There was people turning up off the streets. They were being put on sofas to dry out. People would be there trying to keep them awake. Other members would be rallying. Then they'd do the game. Then that person would kind of feel like they were in a loving hug, I suppose, and they trusted each other. Then they were trusting each other enough, I suppose, to do all this screaming and yelling and aggressive honesty. And then they knew that they were still part of this whole group and being held. So as the group gained popularity, they faced lots of financial issues like how to feed and provide housing for the members. So Chuck, who's also known as the Old Man, transformed the organization into a business focused on helping drug addicts. He became the executive director and established the business as a non-profit organization which provided tax exemption benefits. There's a board of directors and they were all these former drug addicted members of the group because now they're all kind of like in it for good and doing the good work. And at this point, they had around 60 members. It was free to join.
That's a lot, actually.
It's a lot. Yeah. But because all these ex-druggies knew how to hustle, they all set about asking for free stuff from companies. And they thought, well, this is a good thing to do. So they found themselves inundated with donations from things like sofas to cattle, cotton, to the point where jobs were created to process these donations and turn them into more money-making businesses. So they had apartment buildings, they had butcheries, they had gas stations.
Holy
Everybody
shit.
was put to work. I know. And this is where the money started to come flowing in. No one was paid, but you got food and lodgings. So it's almost like one of those utopian societies, like communism, almost, but not quite. Charles, or Chuck, or even the old man as he's been called already, had 2 kids from previous marriages, and he married a member of the group called Betty, who was an ex-drug addict and ex-sex worker.
I love that name. Betty.
And she was really popular with everybody.
I bet she was. No, sorry.
Stop it. At the time, interracial couples were rare and sometimes illegal in certain states at this time.
No.
And Chuck's Synanon was integrating people of all colours and backgrounds. And this was groundbreaking. Except there was backlash from the local community over the sight of ex-addicts and interracial communal living. But Chuck had created a successful social movement where all problems could be talked out and healed. And he was the one, they said, possibly coined the phrase, "This is the first day of the rest of your life."
Well, that's a really fucking good phrase.
Absolutely. But before long, people that they called the squares started joining up, which were just regular people, not addicts. They were interested in the game and they found taking part in it really liberating. And many of the original members had been away from their children for ages. So at this point, Synanon was all set up and they said, well, bring your kids. In fact, we'll make it fun for all the family. And even the kids can take part in their own version of the game. Now, of course, you know where I'm going with this, Michelle.
Yeah.
Everything is filmed. They filmed everything. And it is really hard to watch because you get to see it in the docuseries.
Fuck.
Kids yelling and screaming at each other, picking on each other.
Lord of the Flies.
But of course, there's no violence. But some kids found it hard and didn't know how to play by the rules, especially when these rules were either non-existent or changing all the time. Synanon was really spreading its tendrils by now, and there was another tier of member called the lifestylers. Now, I think we've talked about lifestylers previously when we've talked about cults, where they kind of fund things. They have a life outside of the community, if you like, but they'll come in and they'll dip their toe in and they will fund things through their working out in society. They contribute their salaries, you know. So now they've got big contributions lining their pockets, and Synanon was a success. However, the old-timers, who are the original members and ex-addicts, felt pushed out and some began to leave.
Well, it's not just for the addicts anymore, is it? It's for anyone who has a curiosity about free therapy, essentially.
Exactly. By 1968, they had whole families joining, and Chuck became obsessed with his words being broadcast to all the people of Synanon,
oh my God,
all throughout the country.
Was he wearing a white robe at this point?
Not yet. He was wearing dungarees. They were really fond of dungarees.
I love a dungaree.
They were all wearing dungarees. And the group now had several homes all over California and other parts of the US. And this thing of him recording his words constantly, that's called The Wire. It's very, what's his name?
Ranieri.
No, well, kind of. But the guy who also did lots of taping was the Kool-Aid guy. Jim Jones. Jim Jones did this as well.
The high-level cult leaders, they're all taping everything all the time.
Absolutely. The Wire basically was Chuck's radio station where he could be everywhere all the time and be piped in through speakers all over the country.
Jesus.
Whether he was giving a seminar, playing the game, or just having dinner.
Hang on, just getting my broccoli.
Just cutting up a small piece of beef. So these tapes were made and someone actually had the job of cutting excerpts and broadcasting the highlights. And gradually, Chuck began to make rules of behavior that had to be enforced. For example,
here we go.
Everyone's smoking around this time, but Chuck had to give up. So he decreed everybody give up smoking. And this hard and fast no smoking rule saw lots of hardened smokers have to leave the group. Then he announced that kids should be separated from parents and raised with caretakers in the school. Kids as young as 7 months, Michelle. And the school was called the Hatchery because Chuck felt that this was better for the kids. Parents could visit and take them out for day trips, but that was it. They were the community's children and people took turns caring for them, including, and you're going to love this, breastfeeding other people's children.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wet nursing.
Wet nursing, as they used to call it when it was a popular pastime. Most of the residents would socialise in communal spaces, but you could reserve a private room to have sex with your partner if you put your name down on a sign-up sheet, and this was called the guest room. And at this point, people were being encouraged to have sex, and when you did it, you had to put your name on the little fill-in sheet, and a gold star would go next to your name.
Jesus Christ. This sounds like when you were a kid and your mum put the gold star sheet on the fridge.
Because you made your bed.
Because you made your bed or you did the washing up.
It's not quite the same though, is it? Synanon documented all of its activities on the regular, and there's so much archive footage of the game, and we can hear all of his tapes and all of his conversations that he's broadcast over the wire. Then another type of therapy was launched after Chuck's own experiments with LSD. This one is called the trip. These are intensive, say what you see. These are intensive 24-hour workshops where deep and personal things would be revealed. Right. Chuck's daughter, who was 17, she had her first trip during one of these things, and she said there were 100 people going every weekend. It was a 3-day guided experience where they dressed in white robes, here they come, and guided by a guide or a shepherd. And it would start off with a very aggressive and confrontational version of the game, and then they would all lay out on the floor, being moved in and out of a fugue or semi-conscious state. But essentially, you would have to stay awake for 3 days to experience, as Chuck said, over the wire, in inverted commas, the toxic effect of fatigue.
Oh, Jesus.
And we know what that does.
I was going to say, there was a point in my
You'd
life...
pay good money to join this, wouldn't you?
Do you know what? There's a point in my life where I actually probably would have thought that sounded quite exciting. You know, this whole thing and something new and different. And you wore a robe and a white robe to boot.
You do love a robe.
I do love a robe.
Yes.
Could have been me.
You know, a lot of people signed up. And more than 60 joined in the end. That's just a little spoiler for you right there. During the trip, though, there'd be a lot of alarming confessions, including one from an ex-junkie who, whilst he was in the throes of his addiction, recalled, this is a trigger, recalled throwing a baby in the trash.
Oh, my God.
While he was high.
But it wasn't real. Was that real?
It was real. It was real. He really did that shit.
But was it? What if he was hallucinating? If he was on LSD, it might not have been real. I fucking hope it wasn't real.
I don't know. I think it was real. But by the end, participants would be tired, hungry, emotional, and then they'd be all hugging it out, which satisfied a need for connection and provided deep comfort. And I think this is the key to getting people off the heroin. And this is why people joined in their droves, because they found people who were empathetic towards them and caring. Rather than being society's rejects, they were being embraced. There's a young man called Lance Kenton who was the son of a famous jazz concert player called Stan Kenton, and he was entered into Synanon when he was 11 as a sort of education camp while Stan, his father, continued to tour the world. The schooling was experimental, and adults just let the children decide what they wanted to learn and how it would be taught. Research at the time, Michelle, compared Synanon kids against American mainstream schools and showed that Synanon kids far outperformed the mainstream.
I'm really surprised by that. How do kids know how they want to learn or what there is to learn when they don't know everything there is? If that's a real statistic.
There were kids there of all ages and different backgrounds, I suppose. And there were a lot of adults there as well. They were being raised by a whole host of different people. So they would have been getting educated outside of the classroom as well. But after all this praise, however, came the hate. Media articles began to circulate, which meant more damage to the organisation. And they were casting doubt over the all-powerful old man, a.k.a. Chuck, that he was not really helping drug addicts or doing good as they first set out to do. And in response to these inflammatory articles, a libel case was lodged against the San Francisco Examiner by Chuck. In order to represent themselves, Synanon even started their own law school to take the other side on.
They got money and they're smart.
They got money and they're keen as mustard. And guess what, Michelle? It worked. Synanon settled for $600,000, which was the highest settlement at the time in history at that point. Chuck, he took half for himself and gave $10,000 to 30 of the staunchest members.
Wow. Okay, not bad.
But he got 300,000.
Yeah.
But yet more negative publicity kept coming, and so did the libel lawsuits. And at this point, Chuck is rich. He's flaunting his wealth. The business became a $22 million business. And then at that point, the tax exemption certificate started to look like it might be taken away. So Chuck decreed that everyone needed to participate in Synanon as a church in order to keep the tax exemption.
Oh, here we go.
He noted, however, that it wouldn't replace your own religion because there were many denominations amongst the members, but it would be an add-on. This guy is just making it up as he goes along, basically.
Extra value, Happy Meal.
+1. Meanwhile, the kids of Synanon were having a ball, dancing about on the beach and having a fabulous time until they weren't. What had been fun in the sun, communal living, visits from parents, and all well and good until, on Chuck's whim, they were all moved up to Tamales Bay from LA, which is around a 7-hour journey. Why, I don't know. I can't remember why. But while there, they never saw their parents because the idea was to free. This is why. The idea was to free the parents up to work more. The parents actually believed their kids were being looked after, but it wasn't very comforting for these poor children. Some of them needed more care and affection, and they didn't get it. They would be shut in rooms, crying, scratching at the door, trying to get out. It caused lasting damage for some of them who craved comfort and affection.
Of course.
But Chuck's idea about children was that he thought it was unnatural for women to care for their own kids over others' kids.
Oh, my God.
And that parents were really bad for kids as well.
This guy's a dickhead. This guy's an FU dick.
He's an FU dick.
I tell you.
So this is around 1975. The women started to shave their head after a game. It started as a feminist stance because the men, when they're accused of bad behavior, Michelle, would have their heads shaved. One woman said, shave my head then. And then they all did it in solidarity. And before you know it, the whole community, including the children, were being coerced into shaving off their hair. Unfortunately, this coincided with the Manson court case where his followers were doing the same. So it didn't look good for Synanon, really, to be looking that way.
No.
Then the following years showed Chuck becoming a power-hungry megalomaniac, basically.
I knew it was coming.
I think he must have known it was in the water. There was something called a fatathon, where he decided it was time to get healthy living, and because he needed to. So he made sure that everybody else were forced to diet and exercise, and you had to have your name and ideal weight displayed on charts for everyone to see. And he was just basically getting people to do this shit because he could.
It's just a power game. Give up the cigs.
Yeah.
Get skinny.
Have sex, don't have sex, all of that.
Put your name on a sheet. Can you imagine? And then you have to go into some filthy room where like 10 people have shagged before you.
Gross. It's not nice. There's even a film of him giving a seminar and admitting that he wants to be God. The Wire, which was the Chuck Radio, if you remember, was keeping the 2,000 strong community members together all over the country. And in contrast to the private nature of the game, it was becoming public, being broadcast on The Wire, which was also being used as propaganda to get everybody to do Chuck's bidding, basically. Things at Synanon were changing. Any negativity towards Synanon was being seen as a slight directed at Chuck. And after a game where one of the wives of a high-up board member dared to speak out, Jack Hurst, the board member, and his wife Terry were demoted. Not content with this, Chuck also cast his vendetta to see Jack and Terry split up because he gave Jack an ultimatum that they would have to leave or just get rid of the missus. So he did. He sent Terry packing. This vengeful hostility in Chuck began to get out of hand. And there was one lady who used to really go hard in the game. That was her way of doing it. And one time she went for Chuck in one of the games. It went too far and he poured a can of soda over her head, which was perceived as a violent action, which is a massive no-no for Synanon. Chuck apologized, but then he thought twice and apologized for apologizing. Then he flipped a table and said, I'll do what I want.
Oh, my God, he's a big baby.
He is a big baby. He said he was going to throw her out of the window. And with no violence being the rule, he said, well, actually, I'll change the rules if I feel like it.
Oh, my God, this guy, megalomaniac. Here we go.
Meanwhile, the kids have got it rough. Some had grown big enough to become threatening, so Chuck removed them and a new experiment was born called the Punk Squad. There were teens who were sent to a military-style camp away from the main part of the housing where they did a lot of physical exercise and chores and then were beaten as well. And it seemed to have an effect.
Yeah, they were fucking traumatized. That's the effect.
But guess what? Chuck thought, roll that one out. That's a good one. Get all the kids to go to punk school. So you've got little kids, 9 or 10, living in tented barracks with nothing but a trunk and a bed, being woken at 5 a.m. and forced to run for miles, all while being punched in the head. The beds needed to be made military style, and if they weren't good enough, they missed breakfast. They worked so hard, their hands were bleeding, and there was victim statements on this TV program of people saying there were big men whacking little kids. And some of the punishment givers were really irrational. So you'd be woken up at 2 or 3 in the morning and be thumped so hard you had ringing ears all day. That was some of the testimonies on this TV program.
These poor children.
It's appalling. People, though, out there in the outside world heard about punk school and thought it might be good to send regular delinquents from around the country.
No.
Yeah, to get some discipline. Synanon boot camp.
Fuck.
And again, this helped to maintain the tax exemption, so everyone's loving it. But the kids obviously hated the school and would run away to the neighbours. There was nearby ranches called the Gambininis, and they'd be taking kids in throughout the night, letting them call their parents, getting them taken home. And they actually showed on the TV show so many letters from family and kids helped by the Gambininis.
Oh.
But of course, that did not go down well with Synanon.
Of course not.
No.
So what happened to the Gambininis?
Well, one night they were set upon by an angry mob of Synanon members who went for their dad, Mr. Gambinini, and his family. The son got out of the car and ran to find help. The car was pushed into a ditch and they had smashed up Mr. Gambinini until he was able to get back in his car and lock the doors. They were all screaming at him that he was going to die, that he was done for. It was absolutely appalling.
This sounds shocking.
And after that incident, some of the older kids trained up to protect the group from intrusion and insult and called themselves the Imperial Marines. They would go around administering mass beatings to neighbours and locals who they perceived to be a threat.
Oh my God. This is horrific.
It's just descended into mayhem. On another whim, Chuck decided that there were enough children and everyone needed to stop procreating in Synanon. Cue enforced vasectomies and abortions, and lots of people left at this point.
Yeah.
And the children were being treated so poorly at this time. There were people coming into their schools called demonstrators who would come to the school and administer brutality and humiliation. For example, 9-year-old girls accused of having poor hygiene had to get up on a stage, remove their underwear and show it to the whole school.
Oh my God.
Children were being told to take their trousers and underpants off to be brutally beaten on stage, again in front of the assembled children.
This is just getting kind of sick and depraved.
In January 1977, Betty got sick with lung cancer and died within 4 months, which rocked the community, particularly Chuck. But that didn't stop him from moving on within months after advertising on The Wire for a new wife.
What?
The school teacher put her hand up, so she was next. Now, he didn't love her, but he did decide that this wife swap idea should be rolled out. Starting with his kids, he broke up their marriages and forced love to happen with a new partner. Then the decree: all relationships are over and you all need to find another partner.
Fucking hell. This guy's God complex is out of control.
It must have been fun, right, for him? One guy who'd been in Synanon since the beginning couldn't do it, so he left, and that involved him being bundled up in the middle of the night and dumped in San Francisco with absolutely nothing.
Right.
After years, he was one of the original members. Some divorced couples had children, and when a partner left Synanon and took their children home with them, they were then abducted back into Synanon. Then the parent, if they tried to threaten to take Synanon to court, were then told that they would be hurt and beaten if they did.
Well, the thing is, too, there's the law school and they've got money. So
they're quite powerful.
They're powerful. They've got cash behind them. It must be really hard to go up against this organisation to get your kids back.
Yeah. Now, we're still in 1977, and LA Times reporter Nada Zacchino covered a story about a woman called Frances Wynn who had a breakdown and was walking on the Santa Monica beach in front of Synanon headquarters when she ran into a member. And what happened next was her reported kidnapping and torture. 10 days later, her husband and the attorney Paul Morantz got her back and took Synanon to court for kidnapping. But Synanon had a different story to this. They said that she had come to Synanon to escape her violent husband. But Nada and Paul opened up the way for a bigger story about the abuse and the scandal that had been a part of Synanon for a while. And Chuck was furious. He took it bad. He would rage and rage on the wire about the enemies and that they needed to protect themselves from attack, and would name the people involved, like the lawyer, Paul, and say things like, don't fuck with Synanon. The community at this point were armed with guns, ammo, and had shooting lessons. And this not-for-profit organization that were meant to be helping people told their members to sleep with their clothes on overnight so they could jump up and defend against attacks.
Oh, God. So you are sleeping with one eye open. You're paranoid. You're armed. Fucking terrifying.
And at this point, Chuck and the other board members ran off to Italy. Chuck hit the bottle, regularly drinking himself into a stupor. So he's back on the sauce. And apparently he had started all the way back before Betty had died. He was drinking.
Right, in secret.
The board didn't know what to do with him when he came back from Italy, and no one would challenge him. He was deteriorating, and so was the group. Synanon was then sued by the abducted woman Frances Wynne and her husband for $5 million.
Good.
Chuck wanted revenge, so he made threats against the attorney Paul Morantz and his family and friends. One day, Paul Morantz went to get something from his mailbox, which was on the inside of his front door, and was bitten by a rattlesnake that was inside.
Oh, my God.
The snake had had its rattles removed so it wouldn't make a noise. But luckily, Paul got the antivenom in time and he survived. But because Paul had been threatened, he told his neighbours this, and they had been vigilant enough to supply police with car regos that matched members of Synanon.
Wow.
It was Lance Keenan, who I mentioned earlier, the 11-year-old who was dumped off by his jazz dad. Who was going on tour.
It's Jazz Hand's dad.
Jazz dad. And a guy called Joe Musico, actually, which is a great name. So these two guys then got arrested. The ranch was raided, and the authorities found some tapes of wire transmissions of Chuck threatening to hurt Paul Morantz's family and cut off his kid's arms.
Oh, my God.
How fucking grim is that?
This guy, he's going too far.
Chuck scarpered then at that point to Arizona, but was found and arrested for conspiracy to murder. They had to bring him out in a stretcher, Michelle, because he was so fucked on the booze.
Oh, God. Raging alcoholic. He must have cirrhosis of the liver or something.
Well, it turns out he was also bipolar, because he was diagnosed later with that. He was very unstable, but apparently charismatic leaders often are.
Yeah.
Synanon threw Lance and Joe under the bus so that dirt wouldn't stick to those further up the ranks. Lance had to sign papers to say he wasn't influenced by Chuck, but he didn't sign, and he was very angry on this docuseries. And by 1980, all three of the people, Chuck, Joe and Lance, pled no contest. However, 22-year-old Lance and Joe were both sent down for 3 years, straight out of Synanon and straight into prison.
Well, if they'd been into
from childhood,
Punky Brewster boot camp, or whatever the fuck it was called, they probably knew how to handle prison.
Well, exactly, but he wasn't very happy about having to go to prison.
Fuck no.
Chuck was then sentenced to 5 years probation for his part. And after this, people started leaving in earnest.
Yes.
Chuck is fuming. He wasn't allowed to have a managerial role at Synanon under the terms of his probation. So his daughter ran the show just as a mouthpiece, with him calling the shots. That's when he wasn't pissed out of his mind drunk.
Yep.
The place basically became a bar at this point. They were drinking up a storm. And then in 1985, the Synanon school was dissolved and the kids got to go to real school.
Oh, thank God.
But not for very long, Michelle, because they were caught smoking and drinking. And when the adults of Synanon found out, they were forced to watch a game for 3 to 4 days without sleep. They had their heads shaved and taken out of the school and brought back to Synanon, where they were made to work in a factory.
Oh, my God. This is such a horrible cult.
It's insidious.
Really. And you must be so brainwashed to think that any of this is okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think so, for sure. Eventually, Chuck succumbed to psychosis due to his heavy drinking and undiagnosed bipolar disorder. One night about 3 o'clock in the morning, he called a meeting, which is very Ranieri as well, isn't it? He accused the group of violating him because somebody had moved his glasses, and that amounted to rape.
Oh, my God. This guy.
So this meeting raged on, and it got women to get up and talk about what it was like to be raped, because some of them had been, and others were starting to see the cracks in his behaviour, even his son Chuck. And so Chuck Jr. actually cut the wires.
Right. Because the thing is, it's like these poor women are talking about trauma and he's like, and someone moved my goddamn glasses.
Somebody moved my fucking glasses.
Come on.
Dickhead.
And then he's like, oh, they're on my head.
Ultimately, they lost their tax exemption and were hit with a $55.6 million fine in back taxes.
Right.
Consequently, they were forced to sell off all their real estate and possessions. And 33 years after this bastard thing started, the Synanon experiment came to an end. Chuck and his wife Ginny, their second or third wife, the school teacher, moved to a trailer park. Oof. And Chuck passed away in the 90s. Despite the turmoil, though, many people still credit Chuck with saving their lives, even while acknowledging the damage that he caused.
But that was in the good old days when it was still actually a self-help group.
Well, obviously it came very far from there. It fell from grace quite dramatically.
Yes.
And these experiments, which were deemed by him, just got more and more wacky. The more he realized people would jump when he said so, he took advantage of it.
I mean, he was on one big power trip.
And that is the very sort of harrowing, I suppose, story of Synanon.
Thank you. I'm disturbed.
Honey joys and saveloys, hands off the fairy bread, you naughty boys.
Well, Geordie, thank you for that harrowing.
Distressing
story. But, you know, like when it comes to cults, there's so many out there that there is no way you can keep track of them all. Because, you know, we know the big ones.
We know the small ones. We know the medium-sized ones. We know all of them.
Oh, I'm glad you do, because there are so many that I've never heard of.
Well, there's plenty we haven't heard of, actually. I'm sure of it.
I think we could just do a cult podcast and never run out.
Which is shocking, really, isn't it?
Oh, it's fucked. It's absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
Today I'm going to look at a cult that has all the elements that this podcast loves.
Oh, so real life, true crime, and
supernatural. Before I do that, I'm going to kick it all off with a murder.
Oh.
We're going to go back to 1989 and fuck that year, because that's what we did last episode and it sucked. So moving right along.
Oh, you mean the music?
Yes, sorry, music.
For those who don't regularly listen, we sometimes do a little rundown of the top 5 hits.
Or more if they suck. It was terrible. 1989 was not a good year. So we are going to look at 21-year-old University of Texas pre-med student Mark Killroy and his mate Bradley Moore. These two could not wait for uni to finish up so they could go party at spring break.
Oh, God.
They were excited to head to the Mexican border and drink up a load of beer, meet girls, hang out on the beach, go to the Miss Tan Line contest.
Oh, God, that's a thing? Oh, no, come on.
It's a thing. Yeah. That was on the American side of the border, but you could also zip over the border to party in Mexico as well at a place called Matamoros. They were like, yeah, we're going to do it. So Mark and Bradley had gone to Santa Fe High School together and had both gone to South Padre Island, which is kind of on the border of Mexico and Texas. So they'd both gone the previous year for spring break, but not together. They both kind of knew what to expect, you know, Miss Tan Line contest. And they were really excited to hang together this time around. So on March the 10th, 1989, Bradley and Mark drove from Austin to Santa Fe, where they were going to pick up 2 other school friends, Bill Huddleston and Brent Martin. Just after midnight, the 4 pals began the drive to South Padre Island. They drove through the night. They finally arrived at their hotel around mid-morning. Obviously, you know, we don't do spring break the way Americans do. We might have schoolies. I don't even know what else. Schoolies.
What's that?
Isn't it an Aussie thing where they go off to, you know, the Gold Coast for a week? And
Schoolies at Goldie's.
Schoolies at Goldie's, and they just, you know, vomit on each other for a week.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is a little bit older. These are university kids.
Right, when they finish, and it's like their big party.
Yeah, but the thing is, spring break at South Padre was massive. It went for 5 weeks. And in that 5 weeks, the town went absolutely mad when,
Oh, no. Imagine living there.
I know, 250,000 pissed up students descending on your town for absolute mayhem. And look, the boys were there for it. And that first night, the 4 lads drank loads, partied loads, hung out with girls, partied till the sun came up. And then the following morning, which is Sunday, the boys started what would become kind of their daily routine. They'd hit the beach, have lunch, go to the Miss Tan Line contest, take a nap, party all night. That night, they decided to head to Matamoros, where they grabbed some dinner, met some girls. To do that, they drove to the border, parked the car, and then walked over to Mexico and partied. Then they walked back over the border to their car and drove back to South Padre Island. Monday was a repeat of Sunday. Beach, Miss Tan Line, lunch, nap, party, before they decided to go back to Matamoros. Again, they parked on the Texas side and walked across. And the scene there was wild. 15,000 spring breakers had overtaken the town.
That's a lot. That's crazy.
Yeah, because it was like the first week. It had only just started.
Do you know what? I went up to central London the other day, Michelle, and it was a bit like that.
Oh, God, they were all buying Christmas decorations and getting excited for Black Friday, I bet.
And I went into Brandy Hellville for teen girls. It was appalling. Just don't do that.
I won't. Why would I? But, yes, thanks for the heads up.
Everything is one size.
Oh, my God. Really?
Yeah.
How the fuck does that
They
work?
get away with that. I don't know.
One size fits all.
I mean, I didn't choose to go in there. I was with my daughter.
Yes, of course. But one size does not fit all.
No, it doesn't. And what sort of a message is that? Anyway, I digress.
It is.
Go on.
Yeah, look, 15,000 spring breakers. They took over the town and the boys were up for it. But every bar had a queue. So they looked for the bar with the shortest line to grab some beers. And the bar they found was called Los Sombreros. And, just looked like any other bar, but it wasn't. It was a gang bar.
What?
Mexican cartel kind of,
right.
gang bar where people had been killed a year earlier. A cop had gone missing because of all the shit going on at Los Sombreros.
I'm thinking After Dark. What's it called again? Was it called After Dark? No, what was that film called?
The Tarantino.
Dawn After Dusk. Dusk Till Dawn. That's
till
it.
dawn.
From dusk till dawn.
Yes. Well, keep that in mind. It wasn't a nice bar, but the thing is, stuff like that didn't really happen to tourists. It happened to other gang members. So I think the lads felt kind of safe. But they left there and went back on a bar crawl and ended up at the Hard Rock Cafe where Mark Killroy was chatting up a girl. And around 2 a.m., Bill and Bradley and Brent, I didn't realise they were all the B names.
They're all Bs.
Bro. They walked out of the bar and they saw Mark leaning against a Volkswagen talking to a girl from the Miss Tan Line contest.
Fuck that tan line contest.
This is 89. I would have thought they'd already realised
By
that
then,
shit
it
was
should be
not
over.
on. The lads, they wanted to go back to South Padre Island and Mark was like, yeah, all right. So he said goodbye to the girl and then he was like, I need to take a piss. He found a tree to go behind and, let loose. But...
Siphon the python. Let loose.
Drain the snake.
Strain the snake.
Drain the snake.
Don't strain it. Don't strain yourself, boys.
So look, he's, taking a waz, whatever you want to say.
Whatever you'd like to say, yes.
Yes.
Urinating, possibly.
Yes. Just, what is it? Spraying yellow.
What?
Whatever. He was taking a piss behind this tree. Geordie, I can't believe we chose that moment to
because it's really awful now.
Take piss.
Now it goes bad and we're laughing.
Yeah, because according to his friends, they never saw him again.
Oh, fuck, Michelle, you made us laugh.
He vanished.
Oh.
I'm so sorry. Now look, the 3 friends were like, where the fuck did Mark go?
Oh, no.
And they spent hours looking for him up and down the bars, but Mark was nowhere. And they just could not understand where their friend had gone. What they didn't know was that a guy called Serafin Hernandez Garcia also needed to pee at that same moment.
Oh, no.
which was kind of bad luck for Mark because Seraphim had just joined the Palo Mayombe religion / cult.
Oh, no.
And one of his tasks from
the
cult was to kidnap people. So Seraphim was part of a family drug cartel run by his extended family, the Hernandezes, and they operated on both sides of the border. Seraphim was 20. He was essentially a kind of middle-class drug dealer. You know, it's the late 80s. But they were mainly just running marijuana out of Matamoros. The family business was fucking cutthroat. And I'm going to say literally here. And it was pretty standard for people to be killed daily.
Oh, no.
Yeah, basically, Matamoros was a dangerous place, not just because of the drugs and the killings, but also because the generations in this drug family were not agreeing on how to run the family drug business. The old generation had their way and the new ones thought they knew best.
Right.
So sides were being taken.
Old school, new school kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, what some of the family members thought the business needed was protection. For some of the Hernandezes, the best protection was magic. And that's when the family got mixed up with the satanic prince of black magic, Adolfo de Jesus Costanzo.
Wow.
Who came in and brought the family into this Afro-Caribbean religion called Palo Mayombe, where, brace yourself, instead of using animal sacrifices for their rituals, they used human body parts, which they stole from graves to get their magic done.
You almost make it sound okay. We've all said, no, that's fine then.
It's fucking horrifying. And this whole thing is a horror show. Adolfo was actually Cuban, and he offered to act as the Hernandez gang's high priest and protect them from all harm, basically make them invisible to police and anyone who wanted to stop the business, and bring them riches, and all in return for a share of their drug profits. And look, it was a deal. He got what he wanted, and the family hooked up with Adolfo. After they did, their business fucking exploded. It was really like they had a force field around them that did protect them. You know, they were protected from police. No bad shit was happening to them. Their enemies were going down. But as time went on, Adolfo told them, listen, guys, you know, we've got to go deeper with this. We need different ceremonies. And I'm sure, Geordie, you know where I'm going with this.
Oh, I think I know where you're going, yes.
Adolfo eventually convinced the family human sacrifices were necessary.
What, like live human?
Alive humans, not from the graves. So back in Texas, no one could understand what had happened to Mark. To his family and all the newspapers that were all over this case, everyone thought at first that he'd just been partying too hard and maybe met a girl and he'd be home in a few days. But when that didn't happen, it just seemed like a weird mystery. Police had been searching for a month and found absolutely nothing, because it turns out loads of people had gone missing in Matamoros. Mark was just one of 60 people who had disappeared between January and March in 1989.
Oh, that's so dark and chilling, isn't it?
The thing was, both the Mexican and the US authorities were joining forces on this, and both of them did begin to think that there was foul play involved in Mark's disappearance. And their first thoughts were he'd been a victim of a drug gang or a robbery gone wrong, but there was no evidence, just speculation. And police were at a dead end and ended up hypnotizing Bradley to see if he could remember anything. And under hypnosis, Bradley said he saw a young Hispanic man wearing a blue plaid shirt with a scar across his face talking to Mark just before he disappeared. Apparently this dude walked up to Mark and said, "Hey, don't I know you from somewhere?"
Right.
This is what made police think Mark had been kidnapped. And at this point, the police felt they were looking for a body, obviously, rather than a missing person. And they speculated that Mark's body was probably dumped somewhere remote where he probably would never be found. Police looked along the border, but nothing turned up. Then a psychic got in touch with police and said they'd had a vision of where Mark's body was. and said it was near what looked like a witch's cauldron.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
At this point, the police freaked out because they were like, fuck, man, maybe this wasn't foul play. Maybe this is black magic.
They immediately take it there.
It's Mexico, Geordie.
Right.
And, stuff did get weird. So on the 1st of April, Serafin Hernandez Garcia drove through a Texas roadblock like he didn't even see it. He crossed the international border from Texas into Matamoros, which kind of put the police on high alert. However, instead of turning on their police sirens and going after Serafin's truck and stopping him, the police decided to follow him using an unmarked car. Serafin then drove to the Santa Elena Ranch outside Matamoros, which was the family ranch, and the undercover police were right behind him. Serafin was inside that ranch for about half an hour before he got back into his car and left. And it was at this point that the police decided to raid the ranch. They found 30 kilos of marijuana near a storage area that had, inside it, some melted candles, some cigar butts, some empty bottles on the floor, and some greasy cauldrons in the yard.
Don't.
The American police were like, okay, nothing to see here. But the Mexican cops were freaking the fuck out because they knew this was a devil's temple and a place where black magic had been practiced. When they reported this to their commandant, Juan Benitez Ayala.
Well done, Michelle.
Thank you. I really just was like, I'm not going to get that. This guy, Juan Benitez, he was like, fuck it, you need to stop this investigation immediately.
Why? Because they're scared.
They were fucking terrified.
Oh, no.
And look, the search for Mark absolutely came to a halt until Juan Benitez was satisfied that the black magic had been neutralized by a curandero who could cast out these demons. And after the curandero did his magic, things in the investigation started happening fast. So on the 9th of April, the police went back to the ranch and arrested Serafin, his uncle Elio Hernandez Rivera, another cult member called David Serna Valdez, and Sergio Martinez Salinas. Another guy was also arrested, Domingo Reyes Bustamante, who was the ranch's caretaker. Now, a different caretaker at the ranch was questioned and told police that there were lots of visitors to the ranch. When they showed him a picture of Mark, he was then like, yeah, he was there. And he pointed to that shack at the ranch.
Oh, God.
When the police interrogated Serafin, he confessed that several people, including Mark, had been killed over the course of several months at Santa Elena under the orders of Adolfo Costanzo, who was the, religious/cult leader who needed sacrifices, human sacrifices, to provide supernatural protection for the drug gang.
So horrifying.
Yeah. Adolfo had told the family that when someone was sacrificed, those doing the actual sacrifice ritual were given strength, abundance, and immunity from law enforcement and injury, which I think is why that guy just drove through that roadblock. He thought he was invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now they're with the fucking police, so I guess that didn't work. So Serafin told police that Adolfo had ordered him to go out there and find a typical gringo, basically a white, blonde male to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Serafin then said he and other members of the gang went into Matamoros, where all those spring breakers were partying.
Rich pickings.
Mm-hmm. And they got Mark into their truck. Thing is, Mark actually managed to get out of that truck and make a break for it. But another gang member in a car saw what was going on, pulled a gun on Mark and took him at gunpoint back to the truck, where he was handcuffed and taken to the ranch. They then apparently left Mark inside the truck all night, and in the morning, the caretaker went to where Mark was and gave him some bread and eggs and water. And that day, Adolfo arrived at the ranch. He and some of the gang members put some duct tape over Mark's mouth and took him into that storage shack. And I'm going to say trigger warning here for those that need it. So on the night of the 15th of March, Adolfo tortured and sexually assaulted Mark.
Oh, no.
He then took Mark out into a field on the ranch and cut his head off with a machete.
Oh, fuck.
His brain was then boiled in that cauldron, which is where Adolfo cooked up the human remains.
What?
Mark's legs were then chopped off above the knee to make it easier to bury him. But first, they put a wire into his spinal column, so after the body had decomposed, they could pull up those bones without any hassle, because cult members would wear the bones as necklaces to ward off danger and injury.
That's so dark.
I know. On April 11, Seraphin agreed to take the police to where Mark was buried. And it was easy to find because they just were looking at all these fucking wires coming out of the ground.
Oh, my God.
Then the police began searching for more bodies. They found 14 more mutilated bodies, plus Mark's, who had all been tortured and sacrificed over the past 9 months. And look, a lot of these were rival drug dealers that they killed and sacrificed. But, you know, poor old Mark, his abduction was just random and, you know, wrong place, wrong time. The macabre story of what happened to Mark hit the newspapers before the last body had even been exhumed.
Oh, wow.
Those 4 dudes that I mentioned earlier, they were thrown in front of the media. And weirdly, all of them were like, yapping, talking about the rituals, the murders.
Wow.
This was because they still thought they were being protected.
Oh, my God.
Yes. So
what do you call that when you take something and you believe it's a...
They took the Kool-Aid.
No,
you
take like a pill and it's not the real pill, but you believe it is. What's that called?
Oh, the placebo.
Like a placebo effect going on there.
Yes.
The power of the mind.
All of this was just bizarre. They really believed that black magic was protecting them, which is why they just didn't care. They were confessing to everything. One of those guys, when they were talking to one of the reporters, said, "Go on, shoot me. Try it. Your bullets will bounce off."
No.
They really thought nothing bad was going to happen to them. The gang also revealed what went on at these ceremonies. So first of all, the high priest, i.e. someone that Adolfo had ordained as a high priest, would offer up the sacrifice and they would cut the victim's throat or take off the top of his head with a machete. They were usually killed first, but not always, and then mutilated. And the brains, heart, lungs, and testicles were boiled in the cauldron. And then the liquid was passed around the cult members there so they could drink it, and then they would be sanctified. The bodies were then buried, and obviously with the wire, and the members present, the cult members at the ritual, would then be even more invincible.
Gee whiz.
So they all wanted to drink that fucking witch's brew.
That's disgusting.
And look, Geordie, there is so much more to this case, but I'm going to wrap up by saying, after all this shit went down, Adolfo took off, but he was tracked down by police who found him in Mexico City. But before they could arrest him, Adolfo was onto them, and he realized what was going down.
Yeah.
So he opened fire on the police and then ordered one of his cult members to kill him. And they did.
What?
So that dude did not go to jail.
And he killed a bunch of police and then somebody else killed him.
Yep. He was like, I'm not going to get taken down and go to jail. Kill me.
Wow.
So it's really hard to find out what happened to the rest of the cult members.
Yeah.
Well, after he died, they were all like, oh, I'm innocent. Oh, didn't do anything.
Wasn't me, sir.
Yep. So they all realized the black magic was fucked. And I can't really find out if they went to prison or not, but all I know is by 1993, quite a few of those cult members were found guilty on charges of murder and drug trafficking.
Yeah.
I imagine the 4 who were arrested went to jail.
Someone had to, yeah.
And that is the fucking gruesome story of, I guess, it doesn't even have a real name. It's just like Adolfo Costanzo. I was going to say Costanza. Adolfo Costanzo's cult. There you have it.
Oh, wow. Gosh, Michelle, that was a real stomach turner.
Yep.
And I don't want to belittle that story because it was really heartbreaking and very, very
Grim.
shocking and sad. But when you were talking about that liquid they were passing around to make them stronger, it reminded me of an incident that occurred here just today.
Oh, no. Did your husband find some more liquid on the driveway and go, oh, what's this?
No. You know, we were in France recently. He brought back with him something called andouillette. Do you know what that is?
I do. I think the chefs have talked about it. Tell me.
It's bloody disgusting. So he had put it in the air fryer. I didn't know.
Yes.
And I went to make something in the air fryer yesterday, just a fish finger or something really
Innocuous.
really bland. Yeah. And the whole kitchen smelt like vomit and shit mixed together because he'd put the fucking andouillette in the air fryer, and the whole kitchen now is stained and tainted with this smell.
Oh, God.
I took it out. I washed and I washed and I washed the air fryer, and then I was able to put the fish finger back in. But that fucking shriveled up looking andouillette, which is made from, I think it's made from offal and guts and all sorts of things, and it does actually just smell of poo. It's bad. I think he may have left it too long, because then he left it out.
Oh, for God's sake.
Like he cooked it in the air fryer, he'd left it in there all day. Then he took it out and then he put it on the side. And when I came back from an appointment this morning, he hadn't gone to work because he'd got halfway there and had a little accident.
What?
Basically, the poor man was shitting out the eye of a needle thanks to an off andouillette, which already smelt like it was off in the first place. So how are you supposed to know? But I will say, people eating offal from France, always exercise caution. Eat it straight away. Don't sit on it for a couple of days. Don't cook it, then leave it lying out.
Yes.
You'll regret it.
I will say, in your husband's defense, his sense of smell is not the best.
Probably why he likes strong sausages like that.
Yes, he probably did not
Ugh.
have a whiff, but you fucking did. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's absolutely grim. And on that note...
Rancid note. Sorry, guys. It's time to say goodbye. And with that, we say, wherever you are,
whatever you do,
just keep eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Dropping.